Hello, guys, and welcome back to the FPL Duo. We're back for the transfer tips video for Game Week 10, the buy, sell, hold, ignore series. We hope everyone's having a good start to the week. How you doing, Jordan, on this Monday evening? Obviously, we don't normally stream Mondays, but going early today.
Yeah, it's a one-off stream, I think. Little change in the timetable, but yeah, hopefully you guys are in tune. Obviously, if you're subscribed and your notifications are turned on, you should be able to see when this video has become live. But yeah, I'm very good this week. Been a good week so far. I'm excited, obviously, for the football later on. Obviously, after we finish streaming.
Yeah, of course, Tottenham are playing Fulham tonight, which kicks off in about an hour, which I'll be watching. However, we've got to move on and talk about Game Week 10 because the deadline's on Friday. So let's start off with the first buy of the video, and this is my selection. So I've actually got Tsimikas as a buy. Now, Tsimikas did play and start the match against Everton in the Merseyside derby. And fortunately for owners, he was subbed off after 61 minutes. So they still got the clean sheet points, the 6 points. If he was subbed off, a bit earlier, they could have lost that. So, that's the only bit, owners are fortunate in that sense. However, I still think Tsimikas is a buy now. He has actually had a price rise to 4.5 million now. But I still think, at his price, with the fixtures he's got, playing first team for Liverpool, he also took 3 corners against Everton. Now, there is avenue to points in that sense. If he's taking set pieces at that price, playing for Liverpool, as I said, I think he's great value for money. And if you're on a wild card, Game Week 10, which a lot of managers are potentially, I think he's a very attractive proposition on a wild card. If I was wild carding, I'd have him as my cheap enabler. So I think he's a great buy. Again, Nottingham Forest at Anfield in Game Week 10. Luton away looks nice. Brentford, Man City, and then Fulham after that. We know Robertson's out for a few months now. It looks like he could face a couple of months. I think up to 12 weeks. So yeah, Tsimikas should be starting for Liverpool for the foreseeable. We'll have to wait and see in the Europa League on Thursday who starts. If Tsimikas is rested in the Europa League match, then he definitely buy him if you can, or on a wild card. I think it's a good pick. What do you reckon on it, Jordan, in terms of Tsimikas as a cheap enabler?
Yeah, I think it's very different, and I think while we're struggling for rank, I think going different is definitely the way forward, and Tsimikas could be the way, especially with Robertson, as we said, out for a few months, and that gives Tsimikas a lot of minutes. We have seen him obviously play in the first fixture against Everton, and he did get his first clean sheet in that game too. So it is looking very good in terms of fixtures, especially in the next 2. You can see 2 clean sheets there for Liverpool, and potentially 1 in Game Week 14. So I see at least 3 clean sheets the next buy for Tsimikas, and with his ownership being differential at 3.6, it's slightly on the rise, as some people have brought him in. Those who have obviously realised that Robertson is out for a while, and obviously Tsimikas is a nice replacement at 4.5 million as well. That's a cheap, nice cheap differential defender to go for, especially for those who have 2 free transfers who want to spend it on a particular player that other positions otherwise are not really available. So yeah, I think Tsimikas is a great buy and a great differential.
Okay, so Tsimikas, first buy for our transfer tips. Let's move on to the second buy pick. Obviously, it's your selection. Talk us through why you've gone with Gordon as a pick and why we should be looking to bring him in.
Yeah, a lot of people would think Gordon is a horrible pick to go for, especially with the fixtures he has. But the reason being is a lot of people are now going to think about bringing Salah in to your team. And to enable that, it will require you to go cheap in the midfield. So I've decided to obviously put Gordon as a buy, because I think even though the fixtures are a bit up and down for Newcastle, Gordon has looked pretty good, especially in the last game where Newcastle won 4-0 against Crystal Palace. He did score a goal in that game. Even though he played only 69 minutes, he looked really great in that game overall. I think he could have potentially even scored more than 1 goal in that match. He was heavily involved, and I liked every part of obviously Gordon in that game. And at 5.6 million, I think he's a really cheap midfield option at a differential selection as well, 6.9%. slowly on the increase as well. But I think with the Wolves away fixture in Game Week 10, I think that's a pretty good fixture to buy Gordon for, I think. Because I think he can obviously equalise on his 3 goals and 4 assists that he already has this season. And I know he has Arsenal at home after that game week, obviously, but you could look to obviously bench him for that game week and then play him again at Bournemouth away in Game Week 12. So he is a player that you'd probably want a cheap player to replace an expensive one. And I think Gordon is value for money, the way Newcastle are playing at the moment. And with Isaac out as well, injured, I think it does allow Gordon as well to be a more attacking as well, alongside Wilson up front, where those two have paired up really well together. You're muted, Huss.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, just to add on what you said, yeah, Gordon, I think, is a great buy. 3 goals, 4 assists is a very nice return for a player. And at 5.6 million, a nice little budget gem. Fixtures are pretty good. We know Newcastle score a lot of goals. They are a team that look, I believe they're up near the top scorers. So Gordon playing for a team like Newcastle, especially at home, they've got a strong record, and a lot of those tougher games are at home. And I wouldn't be surprised if they do pick up results against Arsenal, Chelsea, and Man United in those fixtures. So yeah, I like Gordon. I wish I went with him on my Game Week 8 wildcard. The only issue was that he actually was suspended for Game Week 8. So I would have had to bench him that week anyway. But if you want a Game Week 10 wildcard, great pick. Let's move on then to a couple of players that we should be looking to sell. First up, it's my pick, isn't it?
Yes, this is
So I've gone with Bruno as a sell. Now again, this one is a interesting one because a lot of people are split potentially, because we know Bruno, he did pick up an assist in Game Week 9. However, he does have Man City next in Game Week 10 at home, which is a tough fixture for Man United. And he's taken up a lot of the budget. 8.4 million. It's quite expensive. There's a lot of other players, like the likes of Saka, who has Sheffield at home in Game Week 10, which could be an easy swap to. We know likes of Diaby. We mentioned Gordon. There's Salah. There's Neto. Son, Maddison. There's a lot of midfielders, and Bruno is one that it is pretty. I think he's expendable now at your team. A lot of managers are frustrated with Man United assets, and I think you look at the fixtures. Man City's tough. However, after that, it is a lot of green fixtures there. Fulham, Luton, and Everton look nice on paper, and I think you've just got to judge whether you trust Man United will pick up points in Game Week 11, 12, and 13, because some, managers, might look at those fixtures and think, you know what, Fulham, Luton, Everton, I don't want to sell Bruno before that, but my opinion is I think those fixtures Man United will probably struggle in. They may win those and Bruno might get returns, but I don't think they're going to score 3 or 4 in those games. They might score 2, maybe 1 goal. So that's my reasoning about getting rid of Bruno. I think 9 appearances, 2 goals, 2 assists isn't terrible, but for his price, I think there's better players with better fixtures and teams with better form. Would you agree, or where do you lie on this, Jordan?
Yeah, I do agree with this pick, especially because I've obviously watched Man United playing games since the season started, and I've not been convinced in any of their fixtures where it's been a winnable one that they've deserved, really. And I think that Sheffield United fixture in Game Week 9 was the final straw for Man United assets, because that was the fixture where if we didn't see any improvement for Man United assets, then we would most likely want to sell them, especially the way they are playing at the moment and the way the manager is letting them play at the moment. And in terms of Bruno, even though he did get an assist and bonus points from McTominay's goal in the Sheffield United game, it was still a game where Sheffield United could have got something out of, and Man United could potentially lost or even drew in that game. And with Man City at home next, Manchester derby, big game for Manchester United. I imagine they will turn up much more in that game, but again, there's not much to expect for Man United asset. And Bruno at 8.4 million, it's a shame that he's only got 2 goals and 2 assists this season, because normally he's great for assists. It's similar to last season where Kevin De Bruyne and also Bruno were sort of double digits in terms of assists. But for this season, it's the total opposite for Bruno, and Man United overall assets haven't been that great. And a lot of people I've obviously seen that because ownership is going down for Bruno, and his price is expected to drop either tonight or tomorrow. So he will be even more cheaper than 8.4 million. And for that price, still, it's too expensive for an asset who's only got 2 goals and 2 assists.
Moving on then to the next sell on the list, and that is Mbeumo, which is again your pick. You're an owner of Mbeumo yourself. Why have you gone Mbeumo as a sell then? Just talk us through your thoughts on that one.
Yeah, the reasoning being, for obviously Mbeumo is a sell for me, in my opinion, is I did mention before, obviously before he scored his 14-pointer in that Burnley game. Obviously, there's a switch in Brentford's fixtures now as they get a bit more tougher, and I think that Burnley at home fixture was the last easy one for Brentford that they could possibly have, where it's worth keeping Mbeumo for. But now that the fixtures do slightly swing, so he has Chelsea away in Gameweek 10, which, if you saw the way Chelsea played against Arsenal, if they can keep that run of form up against Brentford, then I can see a blank coming for Mbeumo. And obviously, the West Ham one, even though I don't agree that's a green fixture, again, West Ham have been really good this season. And obviously, they might Brentford might struggle against West Ham, and then after that you got 12 and 13 where they go against Liverpool and Arsenal, which doesn't look
quite
great.
tough.
Yeah, so the fixtures get even more tougher for Mbeumo in those as well. So I do see a drop, obviously, in Mbeumo. Obviously, that double haul of 14 points that he got against Burnley at home was pretty much the top tier I think we're going to get for obviously the next 4 fixtures. I think Mbeumo against Luton at home in game 14 could be one where he could be possibly brought back in for. But I think for the run of fixtures that Mbeumo has currently, I think he is worth selling. Just because I don't see many goals coming from him in those fixtures. I could be wrong, obviously, because he is a penalty taker, and it just takes a penalty to be given to Brentford and Mbeumo to score it. But in terms of open play, I don't see much involvement for Mbeumo, I think. So that's why I put him as a sell for this week.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's the sells out the way. Let's move on to some hold players that we think you should give some a bit more time to. Now, first one up, this is my pick. I've gone with Foden. Now, again, Foden is potentially an interesting one because he's been sold by quite a few managers. His ownership is hovering around that 11% mark. 8 appearances, 1 goal, 3 assists. But yeah, looking at Foden, I don't know if I'd be selling him if I had him, purely because who he's got next, Man United. And if you remember last season against Manchester United, he did actually get a hat trick, and that just makes me think Pep's going to play him again. Foden has actually played 90 minutes for the last 3 fixtures, so that makes me think that he's not really a rotation risk in that sense, especially with De Bruyne still out. So I think he's going to play against Man United. We know what he did against them last season, and Foden is an explosive pick. He's an exciting pick. When he does return, he's usually a double-digit haul. And I wouldn't be selling Foden personally ahead of Man United. I don't think that's a red fixture per se. I think I think it's a good fixture for him. I honestly do. I know his underlying numbers don't look too great on paper, but I just think if I had Foden, I wouldn't want to sell him ahead of Man United personally, just because the way Man United are playing, the way Man City, are looking to bounce back sort of from their disappointing defeats back to back. Obviously, they did against on the weekend against Brighton, but I'm sure they want to go and put a statement down, beat Man United, and I think Foden would be someone that I'd want to hold. So yeah, for that reason, it might be more an emotional decision, but I think Foden could do well against Man United. So for that reason, he's a hold. But yeah, let's move on to the other hold, which is your selection. And you've picked Sterling. Talk us through the thinking behind holding Sterling, which is interesting.
Yeah, because again, a lot of people may not want to hold Sterling, obviously, but the reason being I've chosen to hold Sterling is it's really what I looked at when they played against Arsenal. I thought, well, Cole Palmer, especially in that Chelsea team, was really good, but also Raheem Sterling as well. He made some dangerous runs, like we did see him do against Luton in game week 3, where he got that massive double haul of 19 points. So even though he didn't get any returns in that Arsenal game, despite playing like he did in that Luton fixture, I still think for the teams he has coming up next, if he still manages to make runs into the box and cause a bit of havoc for defenders at the back for obviously Brentford, who have conceded goals. Tottenham as well do concede 1 or 2 goals here and there as well. Even though the fixtures are not great on paper, as you can see, because they do have Man City in 12 and Newcastle away in 13, and then Brighton, you can arguably say that's a nice one for Chelsea.
Your fixtures are not great in it at all.
No, they're not great at all, but I'm going on the form of the player rather than the fixtures. And I think Sterling can prove himself in these fixtures, especially Brentford and Tottenham, where there are leaky defence in both of those teams that do concede. I think Sterling can potentially nick a goal or potentially an assist for the next two, of course. And obviously, he does become a hold, I think, for the next 2 game weeks, I believe. He can definitely equalise on his 3 goals and 3 assists. And yeah, if he can keep the run of form up, I think he's a nice, decent hold for the next 2. I think Raheem Sterling at 7 million as well. He is a little bit expensive, but again, his ownership has dropped so much ever since we saw that drop in form for Chelsea assets, then that he becomes a differential. So that's even for more reason why you could hold onto Sterling. And if he gets anything, it will be very rewarding for your team due to his low selection.
Interesting. Obviously, I didn't have Sterling down as a whole myself, but you do make some good points, I guess. Chelsea did look really good against Arsenal, and the next 2 ain't the worst fixtures. Brentford, on poor form as well, I guess. Sort of. They won the weekend, but yeah, it's an interesting one. Sterling. Let's move on to some ignores then. Now, these are players that we think, people are knee-jerking in potentially, and we think maybe you could ignore. Now, Douglas Luiz, again, this is another your pick. How come you've gone with Douglas Luiz as ignore? What's your thinking behind this one?
There's one particular reason is because we have already 2 Aston Villa assets. Like, let's say we got a defender for Aston Villa and obviously Ollie Watkins up front. Because Douglas Luiz is a midfielder, he does take up a valuable spot in the midfield because it's very hard to pick, obviously, a selection of midfielders because we only can have 5 in the starting 11. So the reason why I picked Douglas Luiz is he's not really going to be a selection we're going to go for week in, week out, I believe. Even though he got a double haul of 15 points in that 4-1 win over West Ham, he's a player that doesn't do that every single game week, like we have seen with obviously Ollie Watkins, who gets a lot more returns as we've seen game week in and out. On the other hand, for Douglas Luiz, he has certain spouts of returns. So in game week 2, he got 7 points, but then he blanked for 2 more weeks. Then in game week 5, he got a double haul of 10 points against Crystal Palace. And then obviously in 7, he got 8 points. And then obviously West Ham in 9, where he got double haul 15. So he's not as consistent, I'll say, as an Aston Villa asset to potentially hold and own. I'd rather own obviously Watkins, who's a forward, and bring in an Aston Villa defender, because there's other alternatives like Diaby, who's cheaper. I think cheaper.
Diaby is more expensive. Diaby is 6.6 now, I think, or 6.7.
Yeah, 6.7. Even though Douglas Luiz is cheaper, I still prefer, I think, Diaby over him in that sense. But it is for the reason that these midfield spots are valuable, and I don't think Douglas Luiz is a player that I'd want in the midfield, even though he did score two goals against West Ham, and obviously he's been brought in a lot due to that. So
yeah. Also, the interesting thing with Douglas Luiz is that he's on penalties, isn't he? Which is decent. Like, you'd think Watkins, etc., would be on penalties, but that's one good thing I think about Douglas Luiz. Penalty taker at 5.5 million is decent, but yeah, I hear your points as well about him not consistently going to get you those returns, which is a fair shout as well.
Yeah, and I think if we did go for Douglas Luiz, we would have triple Aston Villa, and I don't think going triple, even though they look pretty good this season. I mean, they're 5th in the table now. I still believe that 2 assets is more than enough, I think, to cover Aston Villa.
Fair enough. And let's move on to the final ignore then. And this is my selection. And I have actually gone with Ben White. Now, Again, for me, this is an obvious one why you should be ignoring Ben White. Just taking a look at Ben White, he is now 5.6 million, so he's quite pricey compared to someone like Gabriel, who's only 4.7. So there's a 0.9 million difference between Gabriel and Ben White, and I think it's a no-brainer. If you're looking to bring in a Arsenal defender, you just bring in Gabriel, who's a lot cheaper, and save yourself that money because I don't see much more attacking threat from Ben White. 1 goal, 1 assist so far this season. Looking at Gabriel, I don't think Gabriel has actually had any returns yet, to be fair, but Gabriel is a threat on set pieces. So I wouldn't worry too much about attacking threat when it comes to Ben White. Just Arsenal defense. Hopefully, you can cover the clean sheet with Gabriel. But yeah, I think White is an easy ignore. I think he's quite pricey at 5.6 million. I don't think I'd want to stretch to him in that sense. His attacking numbers ain't great either. I know the fixtures are pretty good for Arsenal in Gameweek 10, 12, and 14. Some nice fixtures at home as well. So Gabriel for me is the buy. And in terms of Arsenal defense and my priority wise, and even Saliba, I'd rather get in Saliba instead of a Ben White. So that's the thoughts on him. I just think it's too expensive for what he offers on the pitch. But yeah, those are our selections, guys. The 8 players that we've selected. Let us know what you think of the picks as well. Also, if you're just joining in the stream, make sure you hit that like button. Make sure you're subscribed as well to the channel, and we'll take a few questions before we wrap it up. We've got Yogesh with a question. Which player would you say is most essential from these? Saka, Watkins, Mitoma, Bowen, the 4 picks.
Now, that is difficult because I would say it's between Saka and Watkins because Watkins has Luton at home, but Saka has Sheffield United at home. So there's a slight division in that.
Well, if you have to rank them 1 till 4, who's your main number 1 you have to have in your team, the number 2, and so on?
Well, I'll go on how obviously the last game week went. I'll go Watkins first, Saka second, Matoma third, and Bowen fourth.
Okay, I'm gonna go for Watkins first, Saka second, Bowen third, and I'll go Matoma fourth. Question here from Mayor Brid Cassie. Hi lads. It is coming to the point that I'm tempted to get rid of Haaland. Then my team would be Areola, Trippier, Cash, Udogi, midfield of Foden, Salah, Saka, Bowen, Son, Madison, forwards Alvarez and Watkins. Thoughts? So what's your thoughts on this question, Jordan, about no Haaland potentially?
Yeah, that's a pretty solid team without Haaland because we talked about having like the 4 main key players, and that is Trippier, Salah, Son, and obviously Alvarez and Watkins up front, which is hard to do when you got Haaland in your team. But because you're thinking of getting rid of Haaland, that enables you to have all those nice players in your team and obviously having enough money to bring them all in. Yeah, it looks good on paper. The only problem is if when Haaland scores a hat trick or gets a massive haul, not owning Haaland still is scary because obviously his ownership is still very high because it's still at 87%. So a lot of people still own Haaland, even though a lot of people did take him out last game week. And because he got an 8 points against Brighton in the last game, I don't think that's really going to go down. But it is fun at the end of the day in fantasy. So going without Haaland is definitely obviously having fun with fantasy. And yeah, that could really work out.
Yeah, one thing I don't know, we maybe not touched on Man City. The attacking numbers definitely aren't as high as this season. Like Haaland is not getting the chances that he had last season. His underlying data is actually pretty low, compared to last season. Against Arsenal, he didn't create a single, XG is 0.0. Against Wolves in the loss, he had 0.06 XG per 90 as well. And obviously, we know KDB is a big factor behind that. And I think it's fair to say Man City's attack definitely hasn't been the same this season compared to last season, especially with KDB. We know it's a massive miss. But again, I don't think I'm willing to go without Haaland. But just another little stat is if you actually had perma captain Salah, if you captain Salah from game week 1 to now, you'd be up on points compared to Haaland. Like Salah's outscored Haaland if you just captained every week. When you went Salah, you'd be better off. So there is definitely 9 game weeks in. there's enough data to suggest, maybe you could go Salah and go captain Salah if you think that's the way to go. So I don't hate going without Haaland, but I don't think I'm ready to do it yet. I want to see a bit more. Um, I want to see Man City play a bit more, and we know what Haaland's capable of. So it's up to you. I know there's managers that have looked at doing it, but I don't think I'm willing to go there yet.
I mean, Alvarez is good cover for Haaland because you
That's
have
the other
mentioned,
issue.
you have got Alvarez as the Man City cover forward because arguably he's been quite good this season. I mean, he's had blanks here and there, but he has scored 4 goals and assisted 5 according to fantasy. So again, he's had a pretty good record for Man City so far, playing alongside Haaland.
Yeah, that's the other thing with Alvarez doing so well, because he's basically covering Haaland. Until that's the case where Alvarez is matching Haaland, then maybe you can get away with Haaland. It becomes an issue when KDB's fit. Alvarez could potentially drop out, possibly, and then Haaland becomes the main man again and getting most of the chances. So you'll have to make that decision whether you think you can cover Haaland with Alvarez, basically, and then Salah captaincy will get you points as well. So that's kind of I don't have Alvarez, but I think Alvarez again is a great pick. So it depends on your thoughts on Alvarez really, because he is currently Alvarez is doing enough to match Haaland. Neil also says Haaland, I think the low block doesn't suit him, and also the through balls to him aren't happening, i.e. from De Bruyne. Yeah, we've discussed this point. No, KDB obviously is making an impact on Man City's attack, and from what I've seen of Man City, they're not creating as many chances as they were last season, and the attack definitely could go up another gear or two. But yeah, those are the thoughts on that. And Neil also says, are defenders and managers getting to grips with how to play against Haaland, having seen him for a season? I mean, potentially, but that's always likely to happen, I guess, second season. But I think Haaland, one thing we can't forget, he's still the top scorer of the Premier League, which is the mad thing. He's still got more goals than anyone else.
Yeah, he's still proving that he's the top man, dangerous, obviously, from having not many touches in games either. So he's still managing. He could not be involved the whole game and just get one touch and then bang, it's a goal from Haaland. So yeah, he's still pretty much the same guy he was in the first season, but just teams are more aware of him now, as we did see in that Arsenal game. It was very hard for Haaland to get anything in that game, but some teams it can be different.
Yeah, I mean, we'll wrap it up here. I think we'll just keep it quite short today. This has been the transfer tips video for Game Week 10. Let us know what you guys think of our picks. If you haven't, if you've just joined in, hit that like button. If you, are watching on a playback, make sure you do hit the like button as well. Also, leave a comment as well if you're watching it back. It really helps with the algorithm. But yeah, we're back again on Thursday now for the team selection. So no stream tomorrow. Thursday team selection and Friday deadline stream. Make sure you are tuned in for that one. Make sure you're subscribed as well. James says, wait, I have one more question. Yeah, I will wait for your question, James. Drop it in the chat before we do wrap it up. But yeah.
Yeah, hope you guys are excited for, obviously, Game Week 9 is still on the wraps. So we've got
Tottenham playing tonight. Tottenham game against Fulham should be good. But yeah, I'm definitely going to be watching that kickoff in just half an hour, isn't it?
Yeah, half an hour before kickoff. It should be a very good game. A lot of us do have triple Spurs as well, which is going to be interesting what Son does tonight.
Yeah, I've got triple Spurs. I've got Son, I've got Pedro Porro and Maddison.
I've got you Doggy and Maddison and Son.
Is it worth taking a hit to bring in a midfielder instead of Rashford against Man City, or should I hold him? Is it worth a hit? It depends who it is, I guess. If it's Salah, then I'd say it's probably worth it.
Yeah, I think if it's a player like Salah or a player that has a good fixture like Saka, who has Sheffield United at home, then yeah, it could be worth a hit instead of having Rashford against Man City, because he did blank against Burnley and I can't really see him getting much against Man City.
Yeah. I mean, especially if you want the player you're bringing in long term, like if it is Saka and you want Saka long term, you could justify the hit. That's the only other thing. Saka is the one potentially. But then again, Rashford has decent fixtures in game week 11, 12, and 13, which we've said, but I'm not convinced with Man United. So I would get rid of Man United assets, completely. So it depends on your faith. I don't have faith in the United assets anymore.
Yeah.
So that's what I think.
Oh, it could be Matoma. I mean, he has nice long-term fixtures as well. And you'd want a Brighton asset for the fixtures they do have coming up.
Yeah, Matoma's not a bad shout as well. But yeah, I think we're going to wrap it up here. Sorry, guys. And we're back on Thursday, as I said, for the team selection. So take care. Have a good rest of the week. And we will see you Thursday for that team selection video. Thank you for watching. And hit that like button, guys. And we're out.